100 years, right down to the day. Now the witch is back, and there's hell to pay.
Categories are scary stories, scary games, scary pictures, scary movies, scary videos. Oh, and wait. Scary things.
Scary things.
Scary things. True scary story about a girl who is tormented by terrible nightmares whenever she stays at her grandmother's cottage. It is supposed to be a true story told by a girl named Sabina. Okay. My name is Sabina, and when I was a little girl, my parents took me to visit my grandmother. She lived in a little village in the countryside. Her cottage was very small, and there was only one bedroom. My grandmother slept in one bed, and my parents slept in the other, and I had to sleep on some cushions on the floor. We stayed there for a few weeks, and I was troubled by terrible nightmares. Every night, I would wake up screaming. My parents tried to calm me down and ask me what was wrong. All I could tell them was that a man was coming to get me. I can still remember the cause of my terror. Every night, I saw a shadowy figure emerge from behind the curtains in the corner of the room. He was pitch black, and all I could make out was his outline. He was tall and hairy. I would watch in horror as he came crawling towards me with a sickening slowness. He came up to me and whispered something in my ear, and just as I was about to scream, he would place a finger against his lips and whisper, "Shh, shh, shh."
Oh my god.
He tortured me every night to the point where I dreaded going to sleep. As time went on, he began to appear only at night, but also during the day. One evening, we were all watching TV in the living room, and at some point, I happened to glance to my left. The curtain slowly drew back, and I saw the man standing there, staring silently at me. He raised his hand, put his fingers to his lips, and whispered, "Shh, shh, shh."
And nobody else could hear this?
I let out a horrified scream and immediately told my mother what I had seen. She got up and went over to the curtains, pulled them back and forth, showing me there was nothing there, but of course by then he had already disappeared. When the holiday was over, we went back to our apartment in the city and the nightmare stopped. After that, my grandmother would always come to visit us instead, so we never went to her cottage on vacation again. As time went on, I stopped thinking about the man and eventually forgot about him altogether. One summer when I was 13 years old and my little brother was 5 years old, we went to stay with my grandmother again. My parents were in the kitchen having a cup of tea with my grandmother, and they asked me to get my little brother ready for bed. While I was preparing a mattress on the floor for both of us to sleep on, my little brother was sitting on one of the beds. I noticed that he was being unusually quiet. When I looked up, I saw that he was staring at something. "What's wrong?" I asked him, and suddenly he jerked his head around and looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. "Sabina," he said, looking at the curtains, "the man is standing there." Needless to say, my brother and I spent the night sleeping in the kitchen, and we never went to my grandmother's cottage again.
Oh my god. That's spooky. Okay. 1 second.
From Lady Sparrow. I lived in a house from hell for 4 years. From age 11 to age 16, there was constantly something happening. Doors flying open and shut, voices, footsteps. Nothing ever stayed where it was put. I was alone there a lot because both my parents worked and I was constantly terrified. One of the most gut-level disturbing things, though, was the little girl in my bathroom. Every time I walked past my bathroom door, which was constantly since it was right outside my bedroom, I saw a little girl with blonde, curly hair in a rose-colored dress. She just stood there, staring, looking like a photograph from 1905. I started keeping the door closed so I'd walk by without seeing her, but she was always there when I opened it. Once I stepped in past her, I couldn't see her anymore, but I could feel her there. She scared me.
Yeah.
But I felt really sorry for her because she was trapped there, just like me, but probably forever. As the years went by and things in the house continued to get worse, she started seeming darker. started feeling like she wasn't really a little girl. I knew there was something ugly in the house, and it felt like it was presenting this sympathetic image to me. Then I started thinking I was completely losing my mind.
Yeah.
One day when I was 14, I had a friend from out of town stay with me for a week. I hadn't told her anything whatsoever about the house because I didn't think she would come if I did. Right after she got there, we were sitting in my room and she left to go to the bathroom. About a minute later, she walked in with a puzzled look on her face and said, "So there's a little girl in the bathroom."
Oh, God.
Yeah, she hangs out in there. Blonde hair, curls, pink dress. Yeah. You know, it's not really a little girl, don't you? I almost threw up. I was so relieved and terrified and excited and ready to run out of the house screaming. She wouldn't use my bathroom the rest of the week, and I started using it as little as possible without pissing off my parents, who did not want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually we moved out, and I could not have been happier. I distanced myself from it mentally as much as I could. Then when I was 18,
Excuse me.
I took another friend on a road trip to pack up a few things I'd left in the house. My parents hadn't managed to sell it and wouldn't for 5 more years. Wow.
Oh, wow.
The minute we got on the property, my friend seemed uncomfortable. When we came around the bend in the long, steep driveway, he went completely white. I could tell something was wrong, but he insisted he was okay, so we got to work. After a while, he asked to use the bathroom, and I directed him to mine. Not 20 seconds after he left, he came running back in, gasping for breath, and slammed the bedroom door behind him. He started babbling about a little blonde girl who really isn't a little girl, and all of a sudden he went dead still, looked me in the eye, and very suddenly said, "She's not happy with you. You left, and you weren't supposed to."
Oh, my God.
We threw whatever we could grab in 2 trips in our car after I walked him to another bathroom and waited outside the door. And got the fuck out of there top speed.
Oh, my God.
Creepy. Like the haunting stories are creepy because I completely believe in that. I believe that negative energy is left behind.
Mm-hmm.
There's something on the stairs. So when I was a kid, I would race up to the top of the stairs as fast as I could, like it was some sort of silly game. Well, I must have been 5 or 6 at the time. I'm not sure, but I know I was very little. Somewhere along the way, a voice at the top of the stairs started to whisper to me. And it would make bets with me, such as, "I bet you a penny you can't make it to the top of the stairs."
What?
I don't really think there was a certain amount of time or anything. As I said, I was very little, so I probably didn't have any counting abilities anyway. I recall just sitting at the top of the stairs having conversations with this voice. About the betting, of course. Eventually the voice, it was like a whisper of a man's voice, not my own voice in my head, started to bet me my life.
Oh my God.
Instead of pennies, it'd say, "I bet you your life you can't make it up the stairs, blah blah." So I got older, it stopped. I never really thought about it at all. I never mentioned it to anyone until one night I was sleeping over at my brother's place. I was about 18, he was 22. We were talking about spooky stories. Out of nowhere, I brought up the voice at the top of the stairs, and my brother got all quiet and weird. Before I even mentioned the betting aspect, he said, "Did it make bets with you?"
Oh my
We
God.
both looked at each other horrified, and it certainly was freaky after the fact. A lot of shit went down in our family at that period of time in my life, and my mother, a heavily religious woman, said there was a lot of evil in our lives at that time. I don't at all think our place was haunted, but it was built in the late 70s, and as I got older, I never experienced anything like that again.
God. Truculent Truck.
Truculent Truck. We've never figured this out, exactly. And now the 3 living witnesses have to be good and fucking drunk to discuss the whole thing.
Oh.
Oh god.
This has to be bad.
I was 7, my brother was 10, my mom was in her early 40s, my grandmother, her mom, was in her 60s. So we were all cognate. No one was too young or too senile to not recall this nonsense, yet still no bloody answer.
Oh my god.
Grandma lived on an isolated country road in North Carolina that was named after her family since they were the only crazy fuckers who lived on the land for about 1,000 acres.
Oh.
And I do mean crazy. We have stories about the relatives that start with, "You remember the time when Uncle Bob was in the ditch with a shotgun?" Which time?
Oh my god.
Her house had been empty for several weeks while she'd been visiting us in Florida, but we were all back spending the weekend with her before trekking back to the Sunshine State. The house was in this for real country, literally over train tracks, past the salvage yard, and her nearest neighbor, a cousin, because everyone's related to us,
Of course.
ain't without screaming distance. Yes, that seems to be a real system of measurement, screaming distance.
Uh-huh.
In the early a.m., just before daybreak, we're awake because these are farm freaks who wake at the crack of dawn from sheer ingrained habit. We're eating cereal when we hear someone pull up outside. Curious, we all run to the big picturesque window and look into the front yard. There's a strange truck there. No one seems to be behind the wheel, though the engine is idling. The truck is, well, old, for one thing. It's old-timey, like from maybe the 1930s. You could picture the Jode family heading to California in this thing. It's rusted, it's probably was once painted blue. We stare at the thing, bewildered. Mom asks Grandma if she knew who that is. Nope, not a clue, says Grandma. She runs to get the phone to call her cousin and ask him to come up, and she thinks maybe it's a hired hand, that he's just at the wrong farm. Just as she asks him to come on down, the phone goes dead. Well, that's unsettling. All at once, there is a loud, insistent banging on the front door. We all scream. Resourceful huddles us all into the living room, away from the window where anyone can see us. Then, while Mom, me, and my brother tremble there on the couch, she grabs a serrated bread knife from the kitchen and cautiously approaches the front door. What is a bread knife going to do? She peeks out a side window very stealthily, and she turns back to us and looks confused. She shakes her head like, no one's there. We all kind of breathe easier. Then every goddamn door in the house is banging relentlessly. I can still hear it, rhythmic and terrifying. All the doors, all about to splinter and crack. And there are 2 doors in the basement beneath us, so the sound also is like reverberating through our feet. The 3 ground floor doors are shaking, and we can see them trembling and jerking on their hinges from our vantage point on the couch. Finally, Mom runs to the window, either from a psychotic break with reality or terror. I have no clue, and she cries, "Oh, thank Christ, the cousin is here!" We run to her and peek out the picture window. There is no one that we can see in the yard, but can't see all the doors from this viewpoint. My cousin walks by the truck with a shotgun in his hand. Cousin, it should be noted, has pretty much every gun ever made. He looks puzzled, looked at the rear of the truck, then he glances in the cab window and he stops. He goes pale, runs a hand down his face, then he runs towards the house, towards us.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother flings open the kitchen door as she sees him coming. He shouts, "Everybody get behind the couch, get down." He runs past us as we bolt for the couch. Banging starts again. All the doors, and now we can hear the windows rattle. It's like a tornado or the end of the world. We are so scared, too scared to scream. Cousin flings open the front door and fires the huge shotgun once. Bang! Deafening. As he does, the truck roars into life and it sounds like a train. We scrabble up and the banging stops. Cousin is advancing onto the lawn, gun leveled at the truck. We run behind him, want to be out of the shaking, quivering house and near the dude with the gun. The truck peels out backwards, cutting across the yard and racing into a breakneck speed. Tires squeal, rubber is burning. Cousin fires again, and we all cower behind him. He blows out the back window with the sound of 1,000 plates smashing on linoleum. But the truck never even hiccups, just roars down the road. No tags, not even a vanity plate on the back. There's no one behind the wheel of that thing.
What?
We all had a clear view. Everyone agreed. Not a driver in the cab. Well, anything that we could see, anyhow. The police all called. The police were called. The phone line had been cut. There was not a single boot print in the entire yard except my cousin's, where he had to run in and out of the house. The cousin reported there had been no plate, but when he looked into the cab, it looked like something from a horror movie. He said there were all kinds of weird restraints, handcuffs, clamps, nylon straps, and he said the floorboards looked covered in what smelled like blood to him.
Ugh.
Cousin said he thought he saw a blur of something out of the picture window and ran to fire the first shot, but missed because once he stood there, nothing or no one was on the lawn or in the truck. Then it shot backwards out of the yard and out of their lives, leaving no answers but a deep sense of unease every time we'd visit. Grandma and cousin have passed, deeply religious people. They stuck by their unchanging versions of the story until they died. My brother and mother and I have never been able to figure out, neither did the cops. I think it should be noted.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how all the windows and doors were banging, but we don't know why we never saw a soul anywhere, or how they could get around the sides of the house without leaving a trace in the damp earth.
Mm. Crazy.
It's like that's